Welcome to the F3 Podcast,
where we talk food, football, and fantasy football.
All right, welcome back. It's time to get down and talk about a little bit of football.
This episode, we're going to focus on the Kansas City Chiefs, as our wonderful spinny wheel indicated last episode. We're going to talk about some fantasy football standouts, unbeatable flavors that define Kansas City.
It's time. The Chiefs bring the fire on the field and Kansas City brings the smoke on the plate. Let's get into this, Aaron.
I like that.
I thought that would be fun. So let's start out today. We're going to get into a little bit about what's happening in the NFL right now. A little bit of an overview of some of the big actions that's been happening on the field.
Yeah, it's an interesting week this week. Maybe I'm just speaking here from experience because it's week 8 right now in the NFL. And there's a lot of buys that are going on, particularly this week. At least maybe I feel like there is, especially with my fantasy team. This is one week where my fantasy team, I am turning the other cheek, looking away completely because, oh boy, I
think I saw this at the beginning of the year when you did your team and you were picking it and you're like,
and I was like, I got these great quarterbacks. I've got some amazing quarterbacks that I put on the bench for the bye weeks. And I made the fatal mistake, as some of our listeners might remember when I talked about it in the very first episode of this season, that all of my quarterbacks except for one, I picked 4, all of them were on a bye week on week 8. So I scrambled desperately this week to pick up a quarterback at the last minute when I really actually realized this. And it wasn't necessarily the best pick. I picked Andy Dalton, and I believe this might be a fantasy football record for me personally. He gave me a whopping minus 4.5 points.
Ooh, that's gotta hurt. That's
gotta
really hurt a lot. Okay, let's get back onto the league. What's happening out there? Who's making the wins? Who's playing it?
I mean, it's pretty similar to what we talked about a little bit last week. Not any huge surprises so far. One team, and maybe again, I'm a little bit biased, but a team to keep an eye on, definitely the Seahawks. They're, doing really well. Maybe a little bit better than I actually thought that they might be doing this year. They're one of the teams that are on a bye week this week. They're doing really, really well. It's really interesting. We've got the Sunday night football game going on in the background. Green Bay and Pittsburgh's going. It's a pretty tight match. That's a good game to keep an eye on. There's been a couple of blowouts, surprise blowouts. Kansas City, of course, as we're going to talk about in just a moment.
Of course.
They're always a team to keep an eye on. Not any huge surprises this week, but curious to see kind of, as we're reaching the midway point of the league and of the season, it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out, especially as teams start tightening up. Players, unfortunately get injured. Some teams get players back from injury. So this is kind of where the league's starting to really take shape to round out that final half of the 2025 season.
So who are your predictions right now, the team to really keep an eye on?
I think it's similar to what I maybe had earlier on in the season. It's sort of the typical teams. I don't know, honestly, if Detroit is as high up as I would like them to be personally, but keeping an eye on them.
They don't have the energy that they had last year.
I don't know. Jared Goff has had some good games, but I feel like he's maybe not quite as consistent as he was last year. There's just something, I don't know, a little bit different than last year. So maybe not quite as strong. Always keeping an eye on Kansas City, the Rams. Of course, they've got a really good team this year. The NFC, and I know we talked about that, the NFC is a really good division to keep an eye out on. Those sort of are the top contenders for me. Of course, Buffalo as well, and seeing kind of how that all plays out, and Denver as well is kind of maybe a dark horse to keep an eye on. But there's been a little rivalry or so that's come out this week with Russell Wilson and Denver, his former team, and some interesting tweets back and forth. And
a little conversation on the...
Yeah, especially coming from a guy like Russell Wilson, he's, Mr. Positivity. And it's just nothing, I think it kind of caught a couple of fans off guard with what he tweeted, and you can sure go back onto X and take a look and see what he said there. But he didn't have necessarily the nicest words for his former head coach, Sean Payton, the current coach of the Denver Broncos. And it was really interesting to see that, because that was something completely unexpected from Russell Wilson. So throwing a little bit of shade Sean Payton's way.
Right. All right.
Perhaps deservingly so. But that was kind of the talk of the league this week. That was something to kind of...
But we're still just sort of sitting in the middle of the season, and it's sort of figuring
100%.
out where we're going to go from there.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on because we got to get on to our team of the week.
Yes.
We are talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes.
Now, not only is this like a team that we're talking about, will a team like this ever come again? Or have they peaked at their moment right now? but it's also the guy that stepped out your toe.
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about last week, this is my claim to fame, is I could say that one of the best quarterbacks currently in the league, but probably, a future Hall of Fame quarterback for sure, Patrick Mahomes. I could say he stepped on my toe. And if you want to hear that whole story, just go back one episode when we were at Super Bowl this past spring, which was pretty incredible. And that's a story that I can kind of take with me for the rest of my life to say that Patrick Mahomes stepped on my toe.
After losing the Super Bowl.
After losing the Super Bowl. He stepped on, maybe that's why he stepped on my toe. I don't know. Yeah. But no, it's a pretty, they're a legacy. That word gets tossed around maybe a little bit too often, but they're an incredible team to watch and with an incredible head coach.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Andy Reid. What would you say about him as a coach?
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, like he's right
and you
now.
may have fanboyed at him.
Yeah, I did. That's right. Yeah, I did certainly do that, and rightfully so. Like, I mean, I think his coaching career speaks for itself and what he's done with the Chiefs, and to be able to go to 5 Super Bowls in the last 6 years or whatever it might be, and to win 3 of them is pretty incredible, and something that like I said, that word legacy gets tossed around maybe all too often, but I think in a situation like this, what he's done with the team, what he's done with the players and the team that they have is pretty remarkable. And it's certainly not something that you see maybe once in a generation. So,
well, I wanted to look at this. Like, I mean, for me, meeting him, we kind of met him.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing, but he was in Radio Row down there, and he must have been one of the most friendliest guys on the row. This was 2 years ago when he was so happy. He was chatting with everyone. He was throwing around jokes. But yet, he had one of the biggest games, of his career coming up right after that. So I think that kind of speaks for who he is as a coach and as a person.
Yeah. And I just think it's incredible to see, the talent that he can get and his coaching abilities, because with a team like that, you've got so many different player styles, personalities. You're dealing with egos. You're dealing with legacy players. You're dealing with a lot. And I think it was 2 Super Bowls ago. I think that was really evident when Travis Kelce kind of blew up at his own coach on the sidelines. And I think a lot of people caught wind of that. And it was just really interesting to watch how Andy Reid reacted to that, or maybe didn't react and didn't go into. So it's just an interesting perspective on his coaching style. But I mean, the man is a legacy behind him for his coaching abilities and for what he's done with the Chiefs. It's, that team in and of itself, if you look back at the history of it, it's had some pretty amazing coaches. Marty Schottenheimer, I mean, his son now, Brian, is a coach in the league right now. I mean, he was a pretty good coach too. But what Andy Reid has done with the team, I'm not sure if we'll ever see anything like that, at least in my lifetime.
Perfect.
What he's done.
Yeah, I know. Like, he's incredible. So, but let's talk about some of the actual players. Who are the highlights that you're seeing on the team right now? Well, I mean,
that's the thing. Like, and when you deal with these things, these teams where you call them legacies, inevitably they do, they might crack and they get to those points. And so I think when you have such a high, there's always going to be people who are looking for that instance of, oh, their time's over and their players are done. And you're always going to be looking for that. And it's easy for people to say that. And I mean, maybe some of it is true. When you look at players there, they've got a lot of older players in the league. They don't have a ton of maybe phenomenal receivers anymore. You've got a couple, you've got Xavier Worthy and things like that. But I would be the first one to make the argument that this definitely should be Travis Kelce's last year. I mean, he was a really good player, but he's definitely reached his peak. He's slowing down. He's getting a little bit older. I think he's there for the clout, and I'm going to say that, not necessarily because he is the best tight end that team should have. How do you get rid of a player like that? And so I think that's maybe where Kansas City might be running into a couple of problems, is you've got these really large egos that bring people together and for the betterment of the league and for the betterment of the team. But is that really the best player for the team? Will that make them excel? And that's the part that maybe could be Kansas City's downfall.
All right. But for the fans there, I know, and we're going to get into food in a minute, but definitely the stadium there and the energy from the fans is one of the top places.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty incredible stadium that's been around for quite some time. I think it was built in the 70s, I believe. But here's your fun trivia fact for the week. Are the Kansas City Chiefs actually in Kansas City, Kansas?
No.
Yeah. Kansas City, Missouri.
Missouri.
Just because because.
Just because.
Yeah.
That's funny, actually. Now, of course, our stadium actually, I was reading here, that's like one of the noisiest.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. You can
Maybe
see,
not as loud as your favorite.
well, I would like to say, and I think Seattle still holds the record for the most illegal procedures, fan-caused illegal procedures in the league, because CenturyLink, or whatever it's called now, has been. I mean, those fans in Seattle literally created Beastquake. They created an earthquake. So take that, Kansas City. But I will give Kansas City credit. They have a pretty solid fan base. So.
All right. Well, let's move forward into a little bit of fantasy football focus. And especially, let's say, with a team like Kansas City, who are the players that you want to have on your line? Who are the ones that are going to get you
there's a
some points?
segue if I've ever heard one. Let me take a look at my fantasy team. Oh, wait, I have Patrick Mahomes. Oh, look at that. Look at that. I have to say, he has been one of the top quarterbacks to take in fantasy football, and I had never taken him previously in my fantasy drafts, and this was the year that I decided, you know what, I'm gonna take him right at the top. I think he was my second round pick this year because I really wanted him, and he has not proven me wrong whatsoever. They're playing Monday Night Football tomorrow night, and he's gotten me quite a good amount of fantasy points, so that's always a solid player to have. There's always I think one of my hesitations, and I spoke about this a little bit earlier, about having some other players from Kansas City on your fantasy lineup. Again, Mahomes has an incredible arm, and he will distribute that ball to so many players. Is there one standout receiver on the Chiefs? I can make the argument that there necessarily isn't. And I didn't choose any particular other players from Kansas City to be on my fantasy lineup because of that. I mean, Xavier Worthy is right up there. If he was an option, I would certainly choose him. I don't know if I would go out of my way to pick him for fantasy. Again, tight ends, Kelce, sure, he'll get you some touchdowns. Is he the best tight end out there? Probably not.
Right. But if you're fans of Kansas City, there may be a little bit of push to pull some of those players to be on your team.
100%. But that's the thing with fantasy, is that you cannot pick your favorite team because it will not make for a good your favorite football team. You have to make sure you're doing your right picks for the points, and not necessarily your favorite team.
So basically, you're saying don't overload on Chiefs and balance your lineup.
Yeah, 100%. I would say that probably good advice for any team. Don't overload it on your favorite team of any type, and make sure you're getting the best players, not necessarily the best team.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. So hope you're all doing well on your fantasy teams out there, and just hope some of these little tips will help you out. So I guess it's time to get into some food now.
I'm really hungry. Let's do it.
All right. So I know this may not be the best place for you, because I really feel this is like a nice meat heavy base community.
Well, it is kind of. You're getting a little bit into the southern U.S., so understandable.
Yeah. So anyways, just doing my thing. I think Kansas City, what I'm learning about the town is it's definitely a food-focused place, especially if you're tailgating and getting out there, whether you're bringing out the barbecue, making some breakfast burritos or whatever to get the team, maybe a pound cake or something like that.
Pound cake?
Yeah, I'm thinking these are some really good dishes to be
Pound
having
cake?
out. Oh, yeah. Come on, you got to go a little sweet and savory out.
Really?
When you're out there in the
right.
tailgating thing, right? Anyways, but I was thinking about Kansas City. They're kind of known for their smoked meats and a lot of their sweet and tangy molasses flavored barbecue sauces. Right. So you're getting those really caramel deep secret sort of flavors in there, or at least this is where I'm going. So I was looking at a bunch of different dishes, and I was like, some nice ribs, right, would be a great start, or a nice tailgating thing. You could have them out, getting that nice, really rich, thick barbecue sauce, and getting that little bit of char just on the edge of the ribs is kind of would be setting out. Then the other thing I started thinking about was some nice burnt ends, because I know we were talking about this.
We were oddly enough talking about burnt ends.
This is basically meat candy, right? So it's all those nice cubed up brisket points at the end that have that really smoky caramelized, but are super tender, and then just maybe served over some white bread with a little bit of barbecue sauce on there. And then I was like, that's close. And I was thinking, because we're talking the barbecue, a pulled pork sandwich would be delicious with a nice slaw underneath it, nice and juicy, completely messy, that goes everywhere on you.
Good football food.
And so I was thinking maybe that's the way to go. But then, you know what? Let's get down to it. When I was thinking about those burnt ends, it's really the brisket.
Right.
You know, like a nice smoked brisket with a nice, beautiful barbecue sauce that you've like baked slow on the oven for like 12 to 14 hours.
It's the only thing I know about meat. Long and slow.
Long and slow. And then you pull this off, wrap it in some butcher's paper, and just let it rest for like a good hour. Like maybe throw it in a cooler or something like that, or something that's sealed up. Even turning the barbecue off and just wrapping it in the paper, just so all those juices get a suck back into it. And so that when you cut into this, you get this really fresh, juicy meat.
So if you're making this for Sunday football, you are committing to a Saturday meat party.
This is a full weekend event, right?
A full weekend of meat?
You're getting a full weekend.
A meat weekend?
Meat weekend, yeah. So I thought this would be the ultimate dish. And then maybe you could throw that in with some nice baked pit beans or whatever. Maybe some creamy corn with cheddar and some jalapeno in that just on the side. Like, I'm thinking this is some good
Kansas City food.
Good
Yeah.
meat. So this was kind of my shout out. This was the pick of the week.
Oh, yeah.
You know, smoked brisket. I don't think you can beat anything like that.
I just want to somehow incorporate meat weekend into a next upcoming event, especially coming from a vegetarian.
That's right. Well, maybe you're just going to have some beans and a little of the corn. A little cream corn would be great for you. Of course, if you wanted to twist that up, you could always throw a little bit of a coffee spice on that just to give it a little espresso burn to it.
On your brisket?
On your brisket would look good. And then, of course, doing that final glaze over the last bit, too, just to get that really nice lacquered sort of flavor of bark on the top of it. Like, just really get that barbecued brown in there. I mean, you cannot go wrong. And a little bit of, thick sliced white bread, I think, is the way to go with this. Maybe throw a pickle. I don't think you can get better than that.
I think the ultimate
pale ale
meat weekend finishes with a pickle.
I think so. It's just the way, just cleans the palate, right?
Yep.
So anyways, I think that's sort of my recap of what we're talking about. We got into a bit of NFL about what's happening around the league.
We did.
Kind of hoping it gets a little bit more exciting I know there's a lot of great games happening. We got to talk about the Chiefs tonight and all the...
And just speaking of great games, American Thanksgiving is on the horizon very shortly. That always makes for some really interesting games there. And like the midweek games, I'm a huge fan of. So it's a good distraction from other things that you should be doing during your weekday. What?
Distractions from your weekday work?
What?
Anyways, we're moving on. Fantasy, we're looking at making sure we balance our teams when we go in there, because apparently if all your players are on a bye week, you're in trouble.
You are in trouble. Take it from me. Make sure week 8, you've got some players actually playing.
Yes. And if you do forget, at least you can make yourself a nice brisket.
Yeah, to drown my sorrows from Andy Dalton.
Okay, so now we got to do next week's.
Yes, we have to turn to the spinny wheel.
It's time to bring out the spinny wheel and get it going. Are you ready?
I am so ready.
Here we go.
Oh, so we're going up a little bit on the East Coast here. Baltimore Ravens.
Ooh,
Maryland.
Ooh.
What do you think when you think of Maryland for food?
I'm thinking the Atlantic Ocean, maybe some nice seafood in that area.
Right.
How about for players out there?
Well, we got Mr. Lamar Jackson. That's a whole episode in and of itself, but I'd be very excited to talk about him.
All right. Well, this has been the F3 podcast, where we're going to talk next week about
food,
football,
and fantasy football.
All right. Thanks for listening to the F3 podcast.